All right, I'm going to pick up where we left off last week. This is class 7, right?
Sure.
Class 7, so. What we were doing is that we're in this section called Controlling Our Convictions. And I was giving you sort of the last part of this was some practical guidelines for being able to control your convictions. And I want to say this is really very, very critical for the ministry. For anybody that's in the ministry. We went through 5 of them. I'm not going to go back over those. But your core convictions are what drive you as a believer, as a Christian. They make you what you are. You become what you believe, if I can say it that way. So if you have the wrong core convictions, then obviously you're going to struggle in your life, especially in the ministry. And one of the areas that I want to encourage you as we go through this, and then hopefully we'll finish it up tonight, is that what you want to happen is that you want your core convictions to be developed from the Scriptures. I don't have many convictions that I think have been developed outside of the Scriptures. That ought to be a core conviction, right? Is that my convictions are going to come from the Scriptures, but that's where you want to get them from. Because what they do is that the Scriptures help define what your core values and your core convictions should be. As you grow, as you develop, over time they can change. I would say over time they should change. I just want to say that. Because we're all growing in the grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ. None of us are right about everything. We have to refine. You know, we talked about refinement last week. That's how the church has always refined doctrine, is to, everybody remember the 3 words? I know James does. We talk about it all the time.
You mean the discussion, dialogue, and
debate. Yeah, and debate.
Don't forget.
So it was really interesting last night. One of my Romanian students, we went to see the movie, The Jesus Revolution, and when we got home, it wasn't had anything to do with the movie. We started talking about Matthew 18 and something that we had seen and. About how I felt a pastor, well, a well-known pastor, had mishandled Matthew 18 and had publicly reprimanded somebody in the service. And now it's on YouTube. And so you've got this person who's been reprimanded on YouTube by this real kind of famous pastor, and I mean the name was called and all of that, and it was unsettling to me when I watched that. So just got to make sure that when you develop a conviction that you have developed it hermeneutically so that it's correct, so that it's the right conviction. And if you're not sure about it, then you have to, I think, sort of work through some of that in your theology. Number 6, this is the 6th in our practical guidelines to help control our convictions, is that you have to define your behavioral values, how you're going to behave. You have to define your behavior. How are you going to relate to people? How are you going to talk to people? How are you going to minister to people? We had a really interesting individual that came into our service this past week. I loved having him there. I really did. He was different, very different. I'm not going to go any further.
It was Alex.
I was about to say, That was the only one.
This guy sat behind Alex, and
He's like, don't say it.
but it was really. You know, when I saw him when he came in, I said, well, this guy's not like me, but I'm not going to pull a James. Well, I asked the really good guy to sit down front, this guy to sit in the back. And then after I met him after the service and I had a chance to talk with him, I gave him a hug, you know, told him I loved him, and he couldn't hear very well, and just had to make a quick decision about there. How am I going to relate to this guy? He's so much different than I am, or than anybody that was in the church. Chris shaking his head.
I know him.
Huh?
I know him from,
Oh, you
Okay.
know.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
right. Yeah, sure.
And I don't know anything about him other than if he comes to our church, I want him to feel safe.
Mhm.
You know, I want him to feel safe. He's different. He's different in every way possible from me. And I want him to feel safe. This is a good, safe place you can come. And nobody's going to reject you. You can come just like you are. You can dress however you want to, whatever it may be, you can come. And the neat part about it is that he could not hear. I could stand right in front of him and talk to him, and he didn't know what I was saying until somebody got right into his ear and talked to him. So I just thought that was pretty cool that he was even in church. So the behavioral values are those values that you develop that help you to interact with people. If you're going to be in the ministry, you better get used to interacting with people, good people, bad people, indifferent people, spiritual people, unspiritual people, people that like you, people that don't like you. And you can be everything else. You can be a great student. You can be an excellent teacher. You can have all kinds of spiritual gifts and skills that you've developed in your life over an extended period of time, but not know how to talk to people, not know how to relate to people. You could be the best cop in the world and stop somebody in a regular traffic stop and be so, you know, you could get shot if you weren't careful, you know. And so you just got to know how to relate to people, and especially, I tell you that about the guy that came to our church. You have to learn your behavioral values and how to relate to people that especially are different than you are. All right? That's the real acid test. It's not how I relate to Jeremy here, or to Chris, you know, or to any of us in this room. It has nothing to do with that. It's how do I relate to those people that are, say, on the outside, I would say even on the outskirts of Christianity, that kind of impose themselves, not impose, but kind of come into your life, come into your church. They're different. How do you relate to them? You better figure that out. You better figure that out, because sometimes they're a test from God to see how you personally are going to relate to people. If He can bring other people like that to you. You want your church, I want to say it this way, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, you want your church to be a safe zone for people that are different. It doesn't mean that you have to violate your convictions. You know, if the LGBTQ community just sort of moves in, you still got to figure out a way to relate to them. They still have value. They still have value. And you've got to know how that you're going to treat them without contempt. To be merciful and to have, know how, you know, we have whole courses that we teach on apologetics. I ought to do a course on apologetics. I think that would really be fun. I've never taught on apologetics. I've read plenty of books on them. And, it was kind of crazy. The other day I was listening to some of the criticism from some of the people that I admire that are good apologetically about everything that was going on at the revival up in, where is it? Asbury. I wanted to say something else. Hilsberg or whatever it was. And I was just kind of stunned at how they were sort of, this is not a revival, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, this is one of those men that I really appreciate his apologetics. They're so strong. They're so strong, how to defend the faith. And And I felt like it was a little demeaning that this sort of movement, I don't know how long it'll last. I mean, it might last a month, it might last 6 months, it might last 2 more days for all I know. But I don't really care. There were a lot of people that have been saved through it. There have been lives that have been changed. And I would want to be, I'd want to say, well, hallelujah. And some of the articles that I read and some of the videos that I watched were saying the exact opposite. No, this is not a revival. You can't call it a revival because, you know, somebody's not preaching the word. Well, they were preaching the word. That's why the revival started, right? And they would start off nights with preaching of the word and stuff, and then it would continue. So you've got to make sure that you know how to relate to people that are very different than you are, and your behavior needs to reflect your personal core values that you develop. I think that's the right term. That you've got to have some core values in your life that you live by. You know, I don't curse. I don't go out and drink beer at night. You know, me and my wife will get drunk somewhere. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Those are my core values. I try not to treat anybody inappropriately. It doesn't matter whether, you know, where we are at Walmart or in a restaurant or at a car dealership getting my oil changed or wherever it is, or here in class. I want to treat everybody the same way. I want to say this to you, men, just listen carefully to what I'm saying. When you get the opportunity to preach in a church or to be a pastor in a church, there's one thing that you want to bring into every service. You want to be the same. You want to be consistent. You want to, you know, if you were looking at it on a chart, you just kind of want to be calm and everything. I think my church, y'all can say amen to this, that every Sunday I'm the same. I feel like I'm the same in class. You know, there may be times I get a little bit more elevated about a topic that's dear to me, but I feel like I'm still the same. And I'm the same in the pulpit. I don't rant and rave. I'm not jumping up and down. I don't yell. If I'm preaching, it's not hard. So my people are comfortable when they come to church. If you've never been in a church, I have. I was in one for 12 years. I'll give you an illustration. I mean, I'll tell you about why I got there a little bit later, but I was in a church there for 12 years. I never knew what the pastor was. We never knew what he was going to be like. One Sunday he'd be high as a kite, and the next Sunday he'd be down here, and he'd come in one day just on a cloud, and the next day it's like he's mad, and his eyes are squinting, and all that kind of stuff. And he had not figured out the impact that had on his congregation. It made his congregation very uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, and that's the wrong discomfort, that's the wrong way to create discomfort. If you want to make your church uncomfortable, you know, one of the points that we've had in some of the teachings at my church is that you've got to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. But you don't, I don't want to just make people uncomfortable because I cannot control my emotions. You know, my emotions are controlling me. And so this is, your behavior has got to reflect what you really believe your core values are. The problem is that just because somebody says that they believe something does not mean in any way that they have implemented what they say that they believe into their life. They just have not. There's no guarantee of that. You could go around and you could ask a bunch of questions in your church. You could go down every row, give everybody something to fill out, and say, "Do you believe this? And do you believe that?" And they say, "Oh yeah. Is this one of your core values?" "Oh yes, it is." You know, but then you look at their life and you could tell quickly that they do not, it's not a core value because they don't live it out. You know, one of the ways that I've taught it here in class before is that what you may call a conviction is not a conviction until you begin to live it out in your life. If you say you believe in prayer but you never pray, you can't call that a conviction. That's a hope so, you know. So your convictions have got to be lived out before they will ever be what I would call a core value or behavioral value in your life. And ultimately how we live our life and how we relate to people is the acid test of what we actually believe. How I live, and how I relate. That's the acid test. Do I live my life in a way that reflects what I say that I believe, and do I treat people? Is that reflected in how I live? I have to relate to people. If you're going to be a pastor, you have to relate to people. You have to relate in a good way with those that may not like you. The younger that you are, okay, that you enter into the ministry, let me say it this way. Not the younger that you are, but the more, if you just enter into a church and it's your first church, it's your first church. Everybody has a first church, right? Everybody has to have a first church. You can be assured that when you enter into that setting, that church does not have a lot of respect for you yet. Now they may say they do because they hired you, but they don't. They don't. And it's going to take them a number of years to trust you and to gain that respect that you may feel like you need. So what's going to happen is that you're going to have other people that are trying to tell you how to do the ministry. And here you are in the ministry and you're the pastor and you're the leader and you're like, well, I'm not going to let you tell me how to do this. God called me, you know, into the ministry. No. You better listen. You would do really well to listen to people that may even be your enemies. I've learned that my enemies sometimes, I mean, I don't have enemies as such, but somebody that maybe doesn't like me, that you can learn a lot about what they say about you, from what they say about you. I mean, they're seeing maybe a blind spot in your life that...
It's often better criticism than what your friends will give you.
That's right. I mean, they're going to be a little bit more honest with you than maybe even your wife or somebody. So this happens all the time. So, but the issue here is that you don't really have a real conviction until it's lived out. It's not a conviction. So your behavioral values have got to be, they've got to become real. Number 7 is that you've got to address any area of your life in which you are struggling. Hey, by the way, Alex asked me if I would consider doing a teaching on how to manage time in the ministry, which I thought was, I think I'll do one of these studies, I'll develop one for that. I thought that was a great suggestion. Time management in the ministry is probably as critical as it is in any other job. Because there's so many, what I call parasites, that are going to come in and just take your time away. Since I've had my cancer, my parasites are my doctors, right? They're like these piranha fish, you know. You gotta go see them, and you know, well, you can come back in 2 weeks, and we'll take some more blood work, and we'll do this, and we'll do that, and we want you to go see the radiologist, and we want you to see the urologist, and we want you to go get physical therapy, and we want you to see another oncologist, and blah, 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 blah. And by the way, have you been to your cardiologist? Have you had a stress test? And it just goes on and on and on. It just never ends. and some days I'm going, I'm just shaking my head like, Lord, when am I going to have some time? And then I'll get phone calls. I've got this one brother that calls me. I have two brothers that call me. And they are just notorious. That they'll turn a 3-minute conversation into an hour and a half novel. They'll take a real short story and turn it into a novel. And just go on and 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 on. It's none of you in this room. It's not.
He's getting really uncomfortable.
I saw him over there.
I told him that's 2 stories about
I don't mind
you.
him. I don't mind him calling me, and I don't mind any of you calling me. I prefer that you would. I love talking to my students. But these two men, Chris knows one of them, and I'll tell you at the break. And if he calls you, he says, I just got a short question. And I go, okay.
Heard that one before.
It's like the guy that walks up to you and says, I'd like to share my heart with you. And I go, no, please don't, please don't share your heart with me. So you got to address any of your area of your life in which you know that you are actually struggling. Why is that? It's because you cannot ask others to do what you're not willing to do yourself. Preachers have a way of being demanding in the pulpit. They want to just be so adamant about Scripture that they become demanding and I think a little over aggressive at times. And then they're not doing they're not living out what they are demanding of others or what they're asking of others, in their life. So when you have real convictions, when you have true convictions, this is a really important point to me, is that the real convictions that you're going to develop in your life are going to be developed out of the struggles and the conflicts that you have in your life. That's where they're going to come from. That's where you eventually are going to develop your convictions, is out of the struggles that God allows you to have and some of the adversities and the trials and the tests that God gives to you. And you have to be careful that you don't run from those. Chris's wife, Tracy, she's not here tonight, but every time I talk about this at church, she's back there nodding her head. She's like this. She's like one of those things you see in the car, those little dogs in the heads bobbing every time it comes to a stop or something. And because she's experienced a lot of that. I've experienced a lot of that. And so, if you know that you're struggling in a particular area of your life, but if you yourself are not addressing, if you're not willing to make changes in your own life that need to be changed, then I'm going to say this to you in a strong way, you don't have the right in the pulpit to ask others to make changes. Mm-hmm. You don't have the right. And I want to say to you in a really practical way that everybody in your church knows what you're struggling with. If you think that they don't, you're naive. Everybody knows what your weaknesses are. I bet if you went around my church and if you ask them, what do you think Gary struggles with in his life? They would all have something to say about it. So everybody knows what you're struggling with already. So to act like you're not, I think diminishes in a really powerful way. It diminishes the value of what you have to say when you get into the pulpit. You've got to live out what you're teaching other people. One of the one of the things that was so grievous to me was everything that happened with, what was his name? Ravi Zacharias, after he died, and what came out of his life, and how he was this wonderful apologist and stuff, and that had a second life. I mean, massage parlors and just all kinds of things going on in his life, and it was like, once you heard about that and it got validated, I mean, it was really true. It was like, I can't read any of his books. I'm just not willing to just read any of his books, because there will be something strategically missing in that book. I'm sure he died and went to heaven, but I lost respect for him, you know. I lost respect for him, and your congregation can lose respect for you if you're not living out what it is that you say that you actually believe. And you have to be very consistent.
When you talk to people that are not in church and try to get them to tell them, it's like just a bunch of hypocrites down there.
Mm-hmm.
So that pastor, you may look at that pastor as a chief hypocrite.
Right. Well, they I gotta say this. They use us to justify and rationalize their own sin,
Yeah.
because they're just as big a hypocrite as we are, you know. But that should never happen. Your life ought to be an open book, right? It ought to be an open book where they can't use you. They can't say, well, you're a hypocrite in this area. James and I have a guy that comes to our discipleship group on Saturday morning, and he struggles. He has a brother. His parents were atheists, and just hated when he got saved. I mean, they didn't know what to do with him. But he has a brother that's very wealthy, that's a millionaire, probably a multi-millionaire. And his brother just will not go to church because he just does not see the consistency, that's the word that he uses, in Christians' lives. It's just like, they don't, and he used to claim to be a Christian, and then he left the faith, he apostatized. He said, I just don't see it, it's just not there. I go to a church and walk in, and I go to any church, a Baptist church, Presbyterian church, Episcopal church, doesn't matter. And nobody's life measures up with what they say that they actually believe. And so he uses us, the non-Christians use us as a reason why they don't come to church. That should never be the case. I want you to think of this idea of, I want you to think of this challenge in this way. As a pastor, you're going to have a pull. You're going to bring people with you, or you're going to take people down with you, right? Either way. If church is split and the pastor will just break away, you know, and somebody didn't like what he said, and they got mad, and they couldn't work it out, and the next thing you know, the church is split, and he's taking this group, and then the other group's staying there, and nobody wins. It's a lose-lose for everybody. But when you make improvements and adjustments in your life, everybody listen carefully, when they see you in a transparent way, making improvements and adjustments in your life, they will begin to make improvements and adjustments in their life. The people are watching you before they listen to you. In fact, I would say they watch you more than they do listen to you. That's why most people don't take notes, all right? Because they can't remember hardly anything that you said when they walk out of the church if they don't take notes. Some people are I'm a note taker. I took, 3.5 pages of notes this past week at church on my little notebook thing. You got to understand that you have the ability to bring people with you. So let's just say that you're struggling in an area of your life. Let's say that you're struggling with anger. Right? Everybody knows it. You've been in the pulpit. You shared with them, man. I had a rough time. But then they see you make the adjustment. They see that it's a real adjustment. You're pulling them with you. You're bringing them with you. You're like a little boat that's got another little boat attached to it, and wherever you're going, you're pulling your people with you. So the more adjustments that you're willing to make, in any area that you're struggling, your church sees that, they're going to follow you. They're going to begin to make adjustments in their life in that particular area. I think the way that the word that you have to write down here is that, it's an easy word, it's not a difficult thing, is that you have to be a model that people can emulate. And it's okay for them to see you struggle. I think it's probably not okay for you to hide your struggles in your life. I don't think that's going to try to help anybody, but they're going to know, they're going to find out anyway the areas that you're struggling in, and you want to be a model that others can emulate. And when you are a model, you're going to find that your church will grow spiritually.
Well, part of the problem with that, though, I'm not disagreeing.
You can disagree.
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
But part of the problem that we see is just in society, whether it be outside the church or your believers inside the church, because that pastor's supposed to be a model, you run the risk of, if you are honest with your struggle, it's, well.
Yeah.
You do run that risk, because as much as we've been forgiven, we unfortunately don't share that same grace and forgiveness, especially back with our pastor. We kind of forget that he is human, just like the rest of us, and is going to have fleshly struggles. So like I said, I agree with that premise 100%, but unfortunately I think we see today a lot of is, I don't think pastors really can feel like they can be that honest about it because of the critique and criticism that they'll get from their congregation. I don't think they have the support.
Well,
I think you're on an island as the pastor.
you're always on an island.
I'm not a pastor, but just from talking to pastors and just listening, you're automatically ostracized, and it's very lonely. Just accepting the call to become a pastor whenever that happens. People cut you out of their life quick. You just become the person that everybody wants around when they need something, but they don't want around when they know you're gonna sit down and talk about something. They want your opinion until you give it to them.
I had a pastor tell me, when you surrender to the ministry, you move into a glass house.
That's right.
I thought that was a really good illustration. And your kids as well,
Well,
because their kid can sit in church and talk, and that's okay, but your kid can sit and talk, and that's a problem. And they're just kids. It doesn't matter what their parents do for a living. My kids are no different than your kids.
I heard a lady say today at a meeting, she said, nobody wants to be the pastor's friend. Nobody wants to be the pastor's friend. He needs somebody to be able to say this is bothering me, and, keep it confidential. And she's like, my husband's friend died, and, he doesn't have that companion that he had before, but I thought that was interesting. I was like,
Well, I think if I can make Robbie, I gotta tell you this will help in the future. I used to work with this guy, I mean, he and I were partners in our architectural firm, and one day, he was talking to one of the other partners, there were 3 of us at the time, and he says, McDonald, he says, I agree with you 100%, but you're dead wrong. And that's kind of how we feel sometimes. But I think the encouragement from all of this is that the more that you practice doing the right thing, the more all of this changes. The more this whole discussion changes.
Right.
The glass house becomes a little more opaque. People trust you. I got a really great card from Chris and Tracy. Did she give it to me at church? Yeah. I got home, almost wanted to cry. It was just, did you bring that card tonight? No, we should have brought it. And it was the exact opposite of what we're talking about here. It was a card that was written for a pastor. I mean, it could have been for somebody else, but we appreciate all that you do for us. We appreciate how you do it. There are several things on the front page, and then on the inside, she wrote for Chris and Tracy about just how much they loved their pastor and appreciated all that we did for our people. So if you go to a church as a young pastor, everything that you're saying is going to be accelerated, it's going to be magnified. The longer you stay there, the better it becomes. All right? That's the teaching in this whole course, right? It's to help you to, in some of these studies, is to recognize that there are going to be these problems and these issues that you're going to face, but you have to work through them. You cannot run from them. You know, the way that I would say it, the way I've taught it at my church, these are tests. They're trials that God allows to come into your life, and if you run from the test that God wants to give you so that He can develop His character, and you go somewhere else, you just have to have the test again. And then you have to have it probably later on down the road, and
more difficult.
and more difficult because you didn't figure out how to do it the first time. And you got just a different bunch of people. You got to learn how to work through the issues that.
Fortunately, the problem is knowing which one is a brick wall that's a redirection, and which one is an obstacle course designed to grow you.
And that's
knowing the differences.
No, that's a
very
great
hard.
illustration. I like that. I would say most of them are obstacle courses that you can get around, and you should see them that way. I don't think there's anything that that you're going to experience in a church that God can't help you to work through. All right, there may be, and you may just lose your patience with somebody and move on. But let's just think of it this way. Let's just think of it this way. I'm asking you, or I'm suggesting that you have to be a model in your church, a model for people to emulate. Well, where else does that have to happen? Well, parents have to be a model for their children, right, to emulate, or your children will just grow up like what we were talking about, you know. They don't have to be perfect. If you're a teacher, you have to be a model, you know, for your students that are in school. If you're a nurse, you know, Chelsea was writing us about this nurse today from my little grandson that had his throat surgery, and he chokes on her milk and stuff, but she was just talking about how the first nurse that came in there on the first shift was just kind of, I mean, what was the word that she used? That she called him a little fuss brat or something. I don't know what it was. Some nonsense, some word that you don't talk about a little 4-month-old baby that's is going under and having surgery, you know. And the next lady that came on the shift was exactly the opposite. So encouraging, you know. They're still nervous. He's still choking. They have to kind of sedate him just to calm him down. It goes down. He starts choking. He gets into these episodes and stuff. But you got to be. Everybody is going to be a model. Employers need to be a model for their employees. I never forget one time I went to a CWP class that Chris was teaching, concealed weapons permit class, and he's a really wonderful teacher, Chris is, and he's he uses a lot of illustrations. One time when he taught on Ephesians, 6 in our church about the armor of the believer, he comes dressed up in his SWAT clothes, you know. He's got the helmet on, he's got the shield, he's got the weapons, he's got everything, he's got the pad on, all that on, you know. And but the way he starts off the CWP class is he says, "How many guns do you think I have on me?" You know, and I knew he had 1 or 2, you know, but I think you probably got a couple on you, you know. He had 8. Tell us where they were.
It was just demonstrating how easy it is to conceal, because show people how to carry. Strong side, inside the waistband, small at the back, ankle, pocket, belly band.
Wallet holster.
No, I didn't have a wallet holster, but just.
It was 8 of them.
It was 8 guns.
Yeah, he pulls them out, puts them on the
It's
table.
like here, you know. And people were afraid, I'm gonna get caught, somebody's gonna see my gun. No, you're not.
No.
I rolled their fingerprints with 8 guns on, and they didn't even know that I had 8 guns on.
It was pretty cool.
And they're like, what in the world?
I'm still in shock about that you could hide 8 guns on you and nobody even know, you know. But he's a real model. Pastors must be models for their congregation. You
Pastors'
cannot.
wives too, don't you think?
Do what?
Pastors' wives as well, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every Christian ought to be a model.
Amen.
I don't think anybody is an exception here. So, the more transparent that you are with your life, the more that those around you will be inspired. If you fail, tell them. Tell them. If we fail, there's nothing wrong. You're not exposing yourself. You're just being honest with your people. And here's what's going to happen if you mess up. If you mess up in an area of your life and you share it with your congregation, the more humble that you become towards them, the more they will embrace your teaching. The more you share your failures with them, the more they're going to listen to you. If you stand up there and you act like you're Mr. Perfect and you got all your ducks in a row, they know you don't. You know you don't. So who are you trying to fool? You know. I heard someone say one time that we may impress people through our strength, but we actually connect with them through our weaknesses, which I thought was really, really good. We connect with them through the areas of our life where we are weak also. It sort of evens the playing field, right? It evens the playing field when you do that, and that's what you want. That's what you want to happen in the ministry. That's why it's not wrong to talk about to talk to your people about your struggles in your life. And I would say that it would be unfortunate if you didn't realize that they can understand what you're going through more than you would actually realize. They understand. If you're having trouble, let's just say you're having trouble with your children. They got children. They've had trouble with their children. Anybody in here have had trouble with your children? Raise your hand, you know. Here we go. It's everybody in the room. And some people got 2 hands up here. So, everybody knows what you're going through. But if you say, well, I never had any problems with my children, nobody believes you. And nobody believes you.
I can write a book.
You know, write a book. We could write a book on it. I think we all could, you know, of all the things. But they grow up. They change, you know. Number 8. This is the practical guidelines. You can win the battle, but lose the war. You can win the battle, but lose the war. You got to be careful what you're going to fight for. This is a very, very important lesson to learn early in the ministry. I know so many young men that they win the battle, but they lose the war. If you have to be right in everything, if you have to make all of the decisions, if everything has to be through your approval, chances are very good that you personally are not going to, let's say it this way, if you have to control everything, that's the very thing that you're going to lose, right? If you feel like you have to be in control of everything that goes on in your church, every decision has to come through you. I've known pastors that just control everything. It happens a lot in independent Baptist churches. Forgive me if I'm speaking to some independent Baptists out there. I know you love the Lord, so just forgive me. But it's different. I know people in Baptist churches, just regular Southern Baptist churches, where the pastor just had to be right about everything. He felt like his ministry was being rejected if other people disagreed with him and didn't want to do what he wanted to do. So chances are that there may be those times when you gain the control that you want, but what happens in that process is that you lose the respect of your people. You lord over them. You lose their respect. And once you lose their respect, it takes much longer to get it back than it did to get it. They'll remember things for a long time. And once you lose their respect, here's what's going to happen. Everybody, you ought to write this down. That if you lose the respect of your congregation, they're not listening to you. They're not listening to you. Why should they? And so you have to be very careful at this point. Generally, people do not leave bad churches. I'll say this again. Generally, people do not leave bad churches. They leave bad pastors and bad leaders. That's why they leave. If you attended a really good church that had a really good pastor who is investing his life in you, rather than asking you to invest your life in him and all of his dreams for a church and a big church and all that kind of stuff, chances are very good that you would love your church and want to stay there as long as possible. I have a wonderful church. It's small. We're not big. There's nothing about us that anybody would just say, well, hey, oh, well, this is where you gotta go. But we have a real family atmosphere in our church. I don't even know if family is the right word. You guys help me out here to go there. We have a very strong love and care and respect for everybody. Everybody.
It's like this.
It is. But it's not exclusive in any way. You wouldn't feel that it's exclusive, you know. It was kind of funny, we had a bunch of visitors this past week when my Romanian student came in and taught. And what happened is that a lot of I asked a lot of my family to come. My son came up from Charleston. My daughter and her family came. My granddaughter came. Who else came? I forget. Huh? Oh, my oldest son came from Columbia. And my great-great-grandson, who was going to have the surgery on Monday morning, he came. So they just came in and sat down, you know. There's some churches that could be a conflict if you take Aunt Mary's seat somewhere.
Yeah, there was a person in there assigned seat.
Right. I had a lady one time. That, literally somebody came in and took her seat. And she asked them to get up and sit. This was a visitor, and asked them to get up and sit somewhere else, which they did and never came back to our church again. So, you know, you just got to be really careful that you don't, you just don't have that kind of, church.
You know, your church was full too, though. I mean, we always talk about size of people's churches, but your church was full. I mean,
But it's
I know we sat down front, so
it's not
hard
that
to
way
see
every
everybody in
week.
the back,
But
but
it was due to
Family
all,
of
due to all
four.
visitors. You know, about half were not the regular attendees.
But we had several families that were gone.
Yeah.
So it would have been a little bit less than what it was without, you bring a large family and you bring 6 people in.
Yeah.
We can't even put 6 people in a pew, you know.
I take up 3 seats myself.
So if you ever really want to truly test somebody's character, this is a great lesson for a pastor, then give them power. Give them power. If you really want to know what they're like, give them power. Give them control over other people in some way. That's what a lot of pastors want, is power. That's the last thing that I want. I'm just telling you right now, that's the last thing that I want, is power over my people. I want to be humble before my people. I want to be their servant. Jesus washed his disciples' feet. He said, I want you to be like me. I want you to be a servant to your people, and not a power monger. All the Sadducees and the Pharisees, they were the power-hungry people, right? All during the Reformation, especially with Martin Luther, he sort of came against the church and was trying to break the power of the Catholic Church and give it back to the common man that was out there, that didn't even have Bibles. What happened to the guy, what was the guy's name that printed the Bibles? What was
Tyndall.
it? Huh?
Tyndall.
Tyndall. What did they do to Tyndall? Somebody tell me.
Burned him at the stake.
They burned him at the stake. Because he was trying to give people the Word of God in a language that they could understand. So it wasn't just hidden over here. So what you should want is not power, but to have trust and influence. Now, I want you to think about the difference between those words, all right? You don't want power. What you want is influence, all right? You want your people to trust you enough so that you influence them. Remember I said last week that you don't wanna make, you're not interested in making a point, how did I say that? It's not that you wanna make a point, it's that you wanna make a difference. I think it's the way that I said it last week. So, I don't want the power. I love my elders. I love my elders. I love their influence in my life. Here's one of the things that I've learned, and I think you'll learn this as you go through the ministry. You ought to write this down. The people that in the ministry that should have the greatest influence on you are the people that are the servants in your church. They're the ones that you ought to listen to more than anybody else. It's the ones that serve the church that you are pastoring.
It's the idea of having skin in the game.
Huh?
So that's the idea of having skin in the game.
It is. It's but there's some people that I know that I have in my church that they just do stuff. You know, that if they see that there's a need. We had a guy in our church. His name was Julian, and I had to be really careful about asking Julian. Telling the church, well, you know, I think that we need to fix this or fix that or something like that, because the next thing I know, Julian was out there doing it. You know, it's just like, and nobody knew who was doing it. He was just out there doing it. I said something one time about this is crazy, about the foundation. We probably did, I'm in I don't know what service it was or the circumstances, but I said, you know, we probably need to paint our you know, get our foundation painted. I come back next week for service and it was painted.
Praise the Lord.
Huh?
Praise the Lord.
Miracles are happening every day here.
No. It's like, he's the guy that I spent in the hospital for, how long was it? 3 weeks? 4 weeks? I was there with him every day. I took my books, took my Bible, I took my computer. I stayed right there with him every day. Because he had that kind of impact on my life, because I knew how much he loved me, I knew how much he loved our church, and I was there with him the whole time.
Do most churches, let's see, let me phrase this right. People within the church that have been there the longest, when they hire a pastor or bring a new pastor on, do they think about the impact that they will have on the pastor, or do they say, how can I impact our new pastor? You know, what can we do, you know, to mentor the pastor? Or is it kind of the other way around in your experience? Is it the pastor comes in and wants to change everything without giving enough credit to the people that are there and have been there already?
And that's a really great question, and I think my answer to that is fairly simple. I think if you go to a church that's had a pastor that's been there for 25 years, that the church loved and cared for, they're hoping that you're going to be the same, and they're going to give you the kind of support that they gave to him to make his ministry successful. If you go to a church that's had 5 pastors in 7 years, you're a duck out of water. I mean, you're a fish out of water immediately before you go. There's something wrong in that church. There's something terribly wrong, because the pastors leave, the pastors are too young, the church doesn't like this, doesn't like that, it runs them off. We had a student that, we had a really good student that came here. I think he came here for classes. I think everybody knows him. I'm not mentioning his name on the paper. You know, he was the 5th in the line of 7. And The church treated him like dirt. It treated him like dirt. So I think it has a lot. James went and preached at a church recently where the pastor had been there for 25 years. Right. Remember the one up in near Ridge Spring, up in that area?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I would think the next pastor that went into that church has got a real advantage over another pastor, because that pastor's been there for a reason. Right? He's been there for 25 years. He hasn't been there for 25 years. I've been at my church, I'm in my 28th year. I'm not been there because I'm fighting battles every week. That's just not, we don't fight battles. We got a copyright battle going on right now. We got to get a lawyer to help us get out of, but we don't have those kind of things go on, in our church. And so I think one of the lessons to learn from this, Alex, is that when you go for an interview to a church, you have to interview them as much as you let them interview you. And I think one of the critical questions that you have to ask them is, what's been the tenure of the last 4 or 5 pastors that you've had? If they say, well, we had one guy that was here for 32 years and we can't remember the others, you're in a good place, But if they say, well, the last guy lasted 2 years and the guy before him was 3 and that they're gone and that kind of stuff, that's a red flag. It's like the shirt you're wearing. It's that somebody's waving a red flag at you. That there's a reason that that's happening. It's because they probably don't know how to get along with their pastor, because a lot of times they haven't had pastors stay long enough to figure out how to work with them. So
I think that's kind of interesting, because I was kind of thinking if there had been somebody like you're kind of irreplaceable. So,
No, I'm
and if
not.
somebody would come in and fill your shoes, then your congregation's used to you and they love you, and are you going to be comparing the new guy to you, and is the new person going to fall short? Is Gary did it this way? I mean, does that play a role, or you just have? That's still a better scenario to walk into than thinking you're gonna fix whatever was wrong.
here's what would happen
with everybody.
if somebody, probably in my church, the person that's going to take my place is going to come from my church. All right? That's the way that we want it to work. All right?
So they will already know that
That's
person
right.
and love them.
They already know them. They know their character. They know. They know everything about that person. But let's say that didn't happen for some reason. If a person came into our church from outside of the church, I don't believe in stealing pastors. I don't see that anywhere in Scripture, that you go to another church and steal their pastor. All right? I think that's almost a sin in some way. But what would happen if they came to our church is that they would treat the new pastor with a lot of respect. He's already going to have a foundation of respect for the pastor, for the pastoral role. Wouldn't you agree with that, Chris? Have you been there a long time, 25 years? So they're going to have a deep respect for the pastoral role. They may have to get used to the difference in the pastor's style and all that kind of stuff, but they're not going to just push somebody out the door. I just don't think that would ever happen.
Is that such a red flag? Because he's talking to different people. Is that such a red flag that you should just take them off the list if there's been several? And you might think, well,
No.
I haven't had him. I mean, they might.
No.
Okay.
It's a red flag that it's going to be a problem, right?
It's a challenge that you're gonna be facing.
That's right.
Was it like a relationship?
Well, hang on a minute. Hold your question. What's your question?
It's not a congregation.
James and I were in a discipleship group on Saturday, and we were having a really pretty strong debate going on, our dialogue, and James started to say something, what did I do? I just completely interrupted. And James says, "Let me talk." he said, "Let me talk here," which was the right thing to say. When I went to my church, it was that way. The guy that had been there before me had been there 3 years. His wife didn't even come to church. The guy that had been there, the other guy that before that had been there 2 years, 3 years. When I went, and I tried to instill this in James and any other student that I would have, is that you want to go into that church with the mindset and you want to communicate to that church that God has called me here and I'm going to stay here, right? And that's a different approach. Everybody opens the door with those famous words, "The Lord has called me somewhere else." I think that's baloney. In about 95–98% of the times that happens. I think that if you know anything about shepherds, if you've been around sheep, the shepherds never leave their sheep, right? And they don't have 10,000 sheep either. Trust me. They may have 200 or 300. I've been to Romania enough times to know how shepherds are. So it's okay to go to a church like that. It's actually going to help them. But the issue is, Rachel, is that they don't believe you. If you tell them, "I'm not leaving this church," there's not a single person in the congregation that they believe that you're just a silly little fool. You know, they don't believe you because they've never seen it work in their church that way, and they have never seen it work in my church. I think the longest any pastor had ever pastored in the church that I'm at now is 7 years. So, I've far surpassed that. So I earned the respect by being faithful to my convictions that pastors don't leave churches, right? That they don't leave churches. So somebody's going to say, "Well, what if the Lord calls me?" Well, He probably not. If you let me say it that way, why would He? Just to give you a bigger church, you know? God, you got to go steal another pastor somewhere. I just don't see how any of that really works to your advantage. I know that there are people that just disagree with me 1,000%. So be it. So be it. I'm going to stand on my conviction. I told my church before I ever took the position. My wife and I were very clear about it. If I say yes to coming here, I'm not going to be a visiting pastor, which I have not been. I don't go around every week. I don't go to Chris's house and visit him. I don't go to James and Cindy's house and visit them. Say, "How y'all doing?" You know.
You did come to our house.
I do come to your house.
Yeah, stop fibbing.
But it's for lunch.
If they eat.
Oh, so that's the trick. Your congregation feeds you.
I got it.
But I've lived out that conviction in a small church that's in a non-growth area. And now because I'm so stinking long-winded, there's nobody that wants to come to listen to somebody teach for 1.5 to 2 hours in a church, except the people that go to my church. Right?
Anybody that's there that's more of a troublemaker bent doesn't stay long because they can't take it.
No, I mean they may last a week.
They'll be there a month or two and they just can't. I'm not. It ain't worth it.
This can't endure any more than this can endure, right? So, or this, I think, yeah,
You're lacking on absorbing what you're telling tolerant.
that's right. So I'm sorry, Alex. You had a question?
Piggybacking on what you've already said,
Mhm.
is it kind of like, and I've seen this in law enforcement, and I'm talking about relationship wise, you're talking about churches who have had pastors for short term. A pastor taking that church and knowing that, even that going into it, is it still going to be that same struggle as there are women in this world and men that will see somebody and they'll say, well, this person has these issues, but I can fix them. And it's a train wreck and nobody gets fixed. Only, both ends wind up a train wreck. Is there ever that point to where, yes, it's a red flag, but no matter how willing you are to serve the Lord and love the people at the church, it's just never good. Like you're going to go to this church and your entire tenure, if you stay there 50 years, it's going to be a fight every week, and you just need to know that going into the door, or can you go to these churches and preach the word and love the people and change the people?
I would say both. I'd say both. I said there are churches that fit both of those. There are churches that have people, it's all about control and power. They're the money brokers in the church. There was a church up in that Bob pastored, and they had the money brokers in the church that basically just didn't like his position on missions and sort of drove him out, But so there are going to be churches that have those kind of people in it, and there are going to be churches that don't. I had the advantage that I was an interim pastor at my church for about 4 to 5 months before we took it. So I had a fairly good overview of what the people were like. And they weren't aggressive. They just needed help. And I was the young guy on the block. Most everybody was older than I was. And but I knew what I was getting into. And I knew they wanted somebody to bury them. But there are plenty of other churches. I know one church near where I live that it's a war all the time. It's a war if you don't agree with 4 people. One of them died, I think. So it's 3 people. They're going to run that church. They're going to run that church. And so it gives you can call the other pastors that went there. You can find out who they were. I mean, your association has got the names of those people. I mean, Chris is an investigator. I mean, he's been an investigator all his life, just about, crawling around on the field looking for dope drops or whatever they call it. You can do your homework and know what kind of battles you're going to have to fight.
Bob mentioned to us one time that he was in a church where he said Jesus isn't there. And he didn't think Jesus would even be welcome there. So that's what you would find out in the interview. I mean, you don't want to walk into a church that's dead, right? I mean, unless you really feel like God is getting you to help it.
Listen, I think it's okay, and you may disagree. I mean, anybody could disagree. I think it's okay if you want to, if a church calls you and you kind of feel like, I think this is where the Lord wants me to go, is to, I mean, my church called me after the 2nd week. I said, no. I said, I'll help you. But I think it's okay to say, what if we have 4 to 6 month trial period, where you see if you really like me, and I see if I really believe I'm called here. You don't hear about that. What happens is you bring pastors in, he preaches one sermon, you don't know squat about him. You don't know anything about him. And you don't even know, and he's got his best sermon, right? He's got his number 1 star, 5-star sermon that he's brought. His kids are all dressed up.
You fed them the night before.
That's right, man. I mean, you gave him fried chicken and fish and one of those swamp things, what is it called? Cookout, and everybody comes over and meets the pastor, and everybody likes you, but you may not be a good fit. And I think it would be smart. I think if that's where if that's where God wants you to be, the church is probably going to say okay. They're probably going to say okay. Say, look, you don't know me, I don't know you. Why don't we get to know each other for a 4 to 6 month period and go from there? And you can learn a lot.
Along them lines, the different experiences that I've had over the weeks in different churches and stuff, I'm really coming to the point where I'd prefer to be called to a smaller church. I know that's not really the American way of looking at things and stuff, but I think there's less hassle that way a lot of times. The more people you have, the more conflict you got to deal with, and I don't know. Am I wrong on that? Do you think, or?
I think every situation is different.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that's the box you put yourself in, you're going to be disappointed. I think you can have a good big church, you can have a really bad big church, you can have a really good small church or a really bad small church.
I suppose, yeah.
I think you just have got to be led. But part of the leading, I think, is the homework that you have to do. The asking questions. I love the idea of raising people up from your own congregation.
I do.
Okay, but 98% of the churches out there don't do that. So we have an entire system that doesn't work. It's broken. That's why the average day of a pastor is less than 2 years in the Southern Baptist Convention. I think it's less than 2 years. Less than 2 years. Men that go to the seminary drop out of the ministry within 5 years. 50% of them do. 50%. The system is broken. What we're trying to do is to figure out how to not be a part of that being broken. You're not going to miss out on anything if that's not where God wants you, because you stayed there 4 months and preached, and
You can learn some lessons during that time.
you can learn if anybody's going to help you.
Or you can learn some lessons for the next place that you go to if that's not where you're supposed to be.
That's right.
Learn some people skills.
You can learn if you're going to be a one-man band or have an orchestra with you. It's just these are really great questions. I mean that's a wonderful question, because it reflects what we. It's the question because we don't do this. We just don't do this. I'm a black sheep, I think, in a lot of places. I mean, there are a lot of pastors who would just completely, man, the Lord's called me. No. No, you're just impatient. This is not a calling for you. This is a career. God doesn't operate like that. He doesn't just bring people in and just ship them out so they can have a bigger church. It just doesn't. It's not biblical. So I forget where we were here in the notes, but I'm glad we had the discussion.
The people that you should have, the people that should have the greatest influence over you
You're
should
right.
be the
The servants.
ones you serve.
That's not in my notes.
No. That's really rough.
I mean, I think all of us were giving you the same answer, so we were obviously gonna help you here.
Yeah.
We don't have a great influence on you apparently.
No, you do. I think that what we were talking about is that your position may give you the power to control. Your title, I'm the senior pastor, I'm the lead pastor, I'm the teaching pastor, all that kind of stuff. I went to a funeral a while back that the guy that was the lead pastor in the church was not the teaching pastor, which I thought was really kind of interesting. They had a really growing church, but they had a guy that was actually the teaching pastor in the church. I'm sure that this pastor taught at times, but he took more of an administrative role to make sure that his church was functioning properly. And I just loved that. I love the idea that they had these sort of defined roles for the men that were really the pastors in the church. You know, they had several pastors, but if you may have that title and you may have that position, but having the trust of your people is going to give you the permission to lead them. Every pastor has to be a leader. They want you to lead. Do you know how dumb sheep are?
I've seen videos.
It's amazing. It's stupid. Somebody was telling me the other day about
Tim and I went and talked to the guy that raises sheep.
yeah, you know, they was talking. Maybe it was Tim that was telling me about how the sheep. The guy was telling me how dumb the sheep were. That they would just go out there and the mother would lay have a baby sheep and
Just have a lamb and just in a puddle of water and the lamb would drown. It's like, well, sheep, and keep on eating. And like lambs are born looking for a place to die. Is the way this farmer put it. But the sheep have no defenses. They're just out there waiting to be told what to do, and they're just stupid animals.
So the videos of you pulling one out of a ditch just to watch them jump back in the ditch
This
is
is
like
it's
is legit.
entirely accurate,
Yeah.
according to this guy this farmer.
yeah.
And they're just looking for a chance to die. That's why they have that shepherd that really keeps a watch on them and puts them away at night and all that in the sheepfold and all that. Otherwise, they're going to find a way to die. You also die.
But when your church trusts you, they're giving you the permission to lead them, and you can lead them without it being a power thing in your life. I know a lot of pastors. You probably do too, and they have the title of being the pastor, but because they have this dominating and controlling mindset, and that's the way that they minister to people, is with this sort of dominating. Some denominations are built around that persona coming from the pastor. Without me going into detail, if you don't know what those denominations are, that they want the pastor to be. I mean, he's the leader. He calls all the shots, and he stands up there like the king. But what happens in that case, if you get to a place where that's the situation that you're in, you may have that control over your people, but you don't have their heart. I really believe that in my church, y'all forgive me if I sound arrogant, but I believe I have the heart of my people. Not because I'm a great teacher or a great pastor or anything. I just think my church trusts me. They know that I'm not trying to mislead them. They have my heart. I mean, I have their heart. They would let me spank them, if I can say that, if it was necessary, if I had to reprove them or correct them.
That's what it was.
Chris, come up here.
Going to.
Chris, come over. We're going to spank you. No.
You're smart enough to somebody, so.
No, I mean, I think they would. I think they would, and I don't think that they would take it in an offensive way because they distrust me. We don't have those kind of problems, but.
Well, that's trust and respect. I'm 44, and if my dad told me to lean over to bed, he was fixing to whip me, I'd lean over to bed and take my punishment because I respect him and trust him. And I think that's a great position to try to be when you're the pastor.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
You want influence, you want trust, you don't want power. If you seek power, you'll lose the trust and you'll lose the influence, if that's what you're seeking. And that's why churches are big. It's because they've had pastors with big egos, and most of them leave. You have to learn how to give responsibility and decision making to other people rather than everything having to flow through you. I'm good at delegating. I'm good at delegating, and delegating is maybe not the right word in a small church. I'm good at asking other people to help me to do other things. I've got these two men that go to my church right now. Whatever is going to happen in the pulpit, it's going to happen with them, right? With them. If I'm out, if my cancer catches up with me, I've got people that I can trust. I'm not afraid of what's going to happen. So you have to let people fail, and when they do fail, you have to express your confidence in them. Right? You have to express your confidence in them. You have to let them know that you trust them if they fail, because you failed and you wanted them to still have confidence in you. So it's just about, you don't want to win the battle and lose the war, right? You're not looking for control. Number 9, always be asking others for their feedback. Always be asking other people for their feedback. Feedback is one of the greatest tools that you'll ever have if you develop it properly for spiritual growth. My church, they can come to me anytime and tell me where they think that I'm failing. It doesn't happen a lot, but they have the freedom to do that. And I don't mind if they do. And I'll make adjustments because I trust them. If they see a blunt eye. If my wife comes to me and she says, Gary, I think that you need to reconsider something, I'm going to listen and make an adjustment. You know, she has that much influence on me. Why? Because I not only love her, but I trust her. I'm not going to take advantage of that. I'm going to listen to her. You have to appreciate that there are going to be people in your congregation that have more wisdom about things than you do. Please don't consider yourself to be a know-it-all when it comes to, you got to be the resident theologian. But that doesn't mean, and there's a difference between being a theologian and being a pastor. We had a debate about that last night. We got home from the movie, and we were talking about how you can be a wonderful theologian and not have the first pastoral skill on the planet, that where you know how to relate to people and work with people. You don't have a clue how to do that, and you have to develop that. And you get, the more feedback that you get, I'd say that the more feedback you get, if you have a really good leadership model in your church, you should be getting most of that from your elders and from the other men that are the leaders in our church, in your church. Chris and James and the other two men in our church that are part of the leadership team. And in a small church, that's about half our church, you know. It sounds kind of funny, but they can correct me, they can reprove me, they can say, I don't think you ought to do it this way, or they can say anything they want to. And I am not going to take it, I'm not going to personalize it, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. Why? Somebody tell me, I've given you the two words. Because I love them and I respect them. And if I know that if I love them and respect them, that they will love and respect me. And they wouldn't just come to me casually and just because they want power or influence. You know, I mean, you know, where they want to be the one that's doing whatever. I had a guy in our church that he used to be a student, and he never came here, but he was a student in Aiken. And he went to our church for a long time. But he always wanted to, he just had this thing where he just had to preach or to teach. I gave him all the opportunities in the world, and he still wasn't satisfied. I mean, he had one whole service. I mean, it was his. It was his, and he wanted more. And I told him on more than one occasion, I said, called him by name, and I said, look, I'm the pastor. And the people want me to be their pastor in the pulpit on a regular basis. I don't mind sharing it with you. I don't mind sharing it with you. I've given you one whole service, a Sunday night service, and you can teach whatever you want to. I go to Romania all the time, and when I travel, you fill the pulpit for me, and it wasn't enough. And he eventually left.
Now, Gary, on that note, what happens when you have the opposite? You have somebody that, whether it be up and coming, established, whatever the case may be, but seems like when the opportunities are presented to you, fill the pulpit. If not.
You mean when there's an opportunity, you're not asking for the opportunity, but the opportunity's there and they don't give it to you?
I will say, in this particular situation, it would be somebody that you would expect
That
to
should
be
have.
in the pulpit, but instead aren't.
It's probably bad leadership, probably bad decision making. It should be obvious in our church. It's obvious in our church who ought to be filling in for me. When I was sick and had, had all my operations, I have what? How many operations did I have?
6?
6?
Was it 6?
For sure.
It was
I'm
6.
sure it was 6.
Yeah, 6
We got 3 6s, that's not good.
yeah.
Within a year or so.
I had 6 operations in
14 months, wasn't it?
14 months. That's every 2.5 months.
Mm.
I couldn't lift over 5 pounds for a year and a half. I had to have people that I trusted. I didn't miss a lot of Sundays. I didn't miss a lot, but if I hadn't missed a lot, I didn't. I just wasn't that. COVID hit during that time too, I think. Part of it. I was at peace. I'm still at peace. I have good men. I have wonderful men that surround me and that can take my place. I'm not irreplaceable. I will be replaced at some point, so. But the men that will take my place, and I hope it will be in the plural, they will do a great job. The point was I have a lot of people in my congregation that have skills that I don't have, and it's just stupid for me not to rely on them and depend on them. The worst thing I can be doing is to always be asking them to do everything my way. This is a big, big point for me, is that this is the hill a lot of people die on unnecessarily, is that they come up with an idea and they want it to always be their way. So it's like, if I ask Jeremy to do something, but I give him a list of do's and don'ts as to how he has to do it, and don't give him the freedom to even fail. I've failed as a leader, you know. So it's something that I work at. If I ask James or Chris to do something for me, I don't try to dictate how James runs the discipleship group, but we have such a close relationship that we can talk about it, right? We want to start. We feel like I have a conviction about it. I know that he does, and some of the other members of our church, that we want to turn our church into a house of prayer. How do you do that? You just say, okay, we're just going to pray. If that's all that we do, if we just say, if that's all that we do, and we say, all right, we're going to just pray on such and such a night at such and such a place, it will just go under like that. Why do I know that?
You did it before, right?
You tried it.
Because we've tried it.
Done before.
We've tried it so many numerous times, and people don't come. So if you don't learn from that, you're just going to repeat that, right? So something has to change. Something has to be different. And so you take the people that you know that want to be involved in it. They're going to be people that elderly that are not going to get out at night. They're not going to come. They're going to be people that don't get off of work at 7 o'clock. They're not going to be there. They're going to be people that have kids that don't want to get out.
How do you service those people?
Huh?
How do you service may not be the right word.
Reach.
Yeah, how do
Include
you, yes, the people that can't, because they don't have the ability to be there for whatever, I don't know if they call them shut-ins or if that's the same thing, but how do you impact them so that they see Christ in you as you help them, even though they can't be at church at the regular times?
Well, they are at church at other times. They're there when the sun's shining, right? And if they don't live too far from the church, they'll come. But we have one lady that I know, this Miss Mary. She's not going to get out at night. She's just not going to get out at night. Another lady, Miss Ruby, you can see her house from the church, so she's going to make it to the church. But the other lady's not going to get out. She doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have any kids here. She's by herself. She doesn't like driving at night. She doesn't see well. I don't want her to come. We'll go pick her up if she really wants to come. Said, I'd really like to be part of that. I just can't get out at night. I'll come get you.
I think you could probably, even if it's like for prayer meeting, like, a couple of people suggested, like, have the prayer request done on Sunday nights in Paston, so that if they have a prayer request, they can't come on that because it's an evening or something, or even just, asking them,
That way the people that do come
You know,
can pray
hey,
for the
we have a
request.
group of people praying for, you know, the unreached people in this group. We included you in this group. I know you can't come, but can you know, be praying at this time for them or something, just some creative way you can try to include them. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know what all the answers are. I just know I failed at it enough that I don't want to fail at it again. But if I give the responsibility to somebody,
Then it's their fault.
uh,
I'm joking.
if they have the responsibility and they feel led by God to do that, then I want us to have the dialogue and the discussion about it before we ever start it.
I know with my dad's church, I mean, today's technology, and my dad's congregation is an older congregation. And I would say that most of them are not tech savvy, but they have a ladies group that meets once a week, once a month, something like that. And before COVID, they would rotate whose house it was. Well, since COVID, they all get on Zoom or whatever other networking app to do it. I mean, you have some that just are gonna be so anti-technology, it doesn't matter. But in today's society, with our technological advances, I mean, if you have people that really want to participate, I mean, the ideas of how to make it work really are endless. I mean, there's so many ideas out there that you can try, whether it be cell phones, whether it be, you know, an online meeting like I know you and Bob do with different brothers from around the world, every
Tuesday, Friday.
every Tuesday, Friday morning. I mean, there's a lot of options out there that you can do that. There's gonna be, unfortunately, sounds like more error than successfuls for you, but it's gonna be trial and error to find what works for that group, for that situation.
Well, those times that we tried at Chime Bell, it was in person,
Right.
and the technology wasn't there at the time.
Right.
You know, so those options weren't there.
We don't even have,
Yeah, you can't get a solid signal, because we tried to live stream
Right.
our services, and
You just can't get it.
we're in a hole.
Yeah.
We're in a dead spot. I think in the near future, we're gonna have,
5G.
we're gonna have the hardline internet there before long.
Say that again.
The regular high speed like you got at your house,
Yeah.
it'll be down there
Yeah,
in next year,
yeah.
but, we'll have that available.
We probably ought to go and tell them that we'd like to be on.
I've already told
Okay, good.
them. I've already done it.
I think this particular time of this prayer meeting, talked with, you know, Eric and Casey, and we've talked with Mike and Julie, me and Cindy, and I think you have a vision to change the culture of the church. And I think with the suggestions that people are bringing up, that we're gonna discuss with them tomorrow, remember we're gonna have a meeting either before or after the meal.
We're gonna have a copyright meeting too, so we gotta work
Yeah.
that in.
Okay, but I texted you that, I don't know if you got that message, but I think there's some ideas that's gonna make it so it's just not some same old, you know. I think there's some good ideas that we can come to incorporate that will, we can change it up at times, and, I don't know, I think there's some good ideas being bantered around that we can all listen to and come to terms with, but it will be not just some boring, it doesn't have to be some dry prayer meeting, typical Wednesday night prayer meeting.
Well, James and I went to a prayer summit recently, and one of the things that I remember that the guy said, that I mean, I might remember it for the rest of my life. He says, the death knell of a prayer meeting is, do you have any prayer requests?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you just get into physical things, you know, this person's sick, that person's sick. Would you pray for my aunt? And we're praying for people you don't even know. It's really hard to get into that kind of prayer. And so the whole purpose, and this guy, that's all he did. He teaches on prayer, and just has a ministry about it, but, and I have really enjoyed it. I know James did. I read the book. I just engulfed the book when I got home, and they just gave it to us for free. But one of the things that he said, and it encouraged me because I already did this. I already do this in my personal life. Is when I pray, and I really pray, I open this up and I pray right out of this. I could open it up to any page, historical narrative, doctrinal page, whatever it was, Revelation. It doesn't matter to me. I can pray out of the scriptures. And the purpose is to glorify and to honor Christ in my prayer before I do anything else. To just pray the scriptures back to God.
Seeking the face of God before you seek the hand of God.
That's right. That was one of the things that he said. That's been around a long time. It's been around a long time, but implementing that, people are still so.
It's like the good.
So you're going to have to model prayer so that people can understand what you're trying to teach. And so you're going to have some issues there. But, we'll have discussion about it, right? We'll have discussion and dialogue, but once we get started, I'm getting out of the way.
And I listened to a speaker on prayer, and a pastor, he said he was challenging our prayer life. He was talking to pastors. He said, how much of your prayer life is things that you're asking God to do that you can fix, that 2 Tylenol and a Band-Aid can fix? He said, I need you to be praying for stuff that's God-sized. And that really just hit home. Like, a lot of things that we pray for, we can go to the doctor,
Yes.
and man can fix. He said, we want them to change lives. We want them to see hearts change. We want them to see revival and people passionate about a relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
We need to be praying things that God-sized prayers. And I was like, man, that's good. That's
And
good
I
stuff. And it kind of goes along with asking the prayer request. That kind of fits, because it ends up being, and those things are okay to pray for, but he's just saying, and
Don't limit it.
in perspective, we need to be having some God-sized prayers.
Yeah.
And I
The
thought
problem
it was-
is taking prayer requests. Is we have some people that will take up the whole time telling us their prayer requests. And we'd rather say, let's not take prayer requests. You pray, we'll agree with you in prayer, or you've got a prayer request, give it to us Sunday or another day, put it in a basket or something, and we'll get to them. But we want to spend that time seeking the face of God, not listen to, Randy's got a sore toe or whatever, something like that, like you say, it's something that, let's seek the face of God,
Well, can I just add real quick? That flea market ministry we did last Saturday, which our church has been doing, I think, right now. But anyway, I was involved last Saturday, so that's why it's relevant to me. But we had 21 prayer requests, mostly from people who are probably not in church, according to the things they were saying to me. And just a whole variety of prayer requests. And like one lady was talking to me, she said, do you want me to put my name? And I said, well, it's up to you. We're gonna pray over it either way. God already knows who you are and what you're. He's like, you're right, he does remember, he remembers me. And I think just knowing and being reminded that somebody can write something on paper that means nothing to us. It's a big deal to this lady, and God already knows her and her situation. And just reminding yourself of who he is and how he is the only one who can step in and intervene. I think, I already knew that just talking to all those different people, that mix of life, walking through the flea market and reading through everybody's problems that they mentioned, and how diverse they were, and the personalities, and just knowing that he is the only one who can and who already knows. Just as, I think, it's like perspective change. You're not just in church with a bunch of other believers, and you have such and such aunt or grandma, and you hear a lot of the same prayer requests every Sunday. Well, how's blah 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 doing? Let's keep praying for her. But you just kind of step out into the community, and you just hear all the stories, and you just know that he can do that. He can just change that. It's just,
You know,
it's a good reminder.
There's a real balance here. There's a real balance because, number one, there are a lot of people that don't know really how to pray. They're not skilled at it, but you can't just say, well, the Lord's not listening to you, type thing. And then there are what I consider to be really legitimate physical needs that people have that we need to pray, that we need to pray about, that are God-sized, but they're still physical needs that are very personal to them, that are family issues, that they want somebody to pray with them because they don't feel confident in their ability to pray. And you want to be there to help them. I think, just for our benefit, James, is that no matter how many people join us, wherever we meet, at whatever time, it's probably going to be people that don't have young kids, or if they have young kids, only one parent's going to come, at best. That we still want to hear those prayers. You know, my little grandson has been in the hospital now. This is his, second night. He's really struggling. He can drown when his mother's feeding him. You know, breastfeeding or bottle feeding, he can drown.
Yeah.
That's how serious it is. And it's serious to me and Brenda. And so if I send out to James and Cindy, and they're, how many people in y'all's group? 10 ladies or something like that? And they push that button and it goes to every one of them. I don't want them just to say, praying.
Right.
What I want them to do is to pray. And to really understand how serious this is.
And to really pray.
And to really take some time and stop. And so the point of that is that the prayer requests that you want to make are not the, what's the right term? The Band-Aid.
Not Band-Aid and Tylenol.
Yeah, Band-Aid and Tylenol ones.
Right.
You want to teach your people that that's not what we're here to do. If you stub your toe, go soak it in some water or something, you know, Epsom salt, whatever you do. We still have got to have a teaching effort as to what prayer really is, how it happens, and then somebody's got to demonstrate that. But we still don't, if you hurt, if Rachel Finley hurts, if something happens to one of your kids, and you hurt, I hurt. And if I don't hurt, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I remember when Adam was here, and what was his sons that were going through Isaac was going through so many problems. And I was hurting so bad for Isaac. That one Sunday I called him up. This was after church on Sunday. I said, can I leave my because we weren't having church on Sunday night. I said, can I come over this afternoon after we have lunch? Will you just let me come and pray for Isaac? And I came over and just, he sat on one side of the room, I sat on the other, and Adam was there, and Jennifer was over here somewhere, Brenda was there. And I had to pray for the boy. I mean, I just felt compelled to pray for him and all the problems that he was facing. And his mother, Jennifer, just sat over there and just cried. And she just cried the whole time that I prayed. And when I got through it, she's still crying, you know, it's like.
Well, unfortunately with Jennifer, that's her strength. If the devil wants to mess with Jennifer, it's one of the kids. Every time. And with our church at Pleasant Hill, it seems like every mission trip, it's some type of sickness, death, something. One year when they went to India, it was my mom passed. When we took all the teens to church camp, it was Hannah was sick. Like seems like a common obstacle for us here at Pleasant Hill, is an illness with a kid or a death in the family somewhere whenever we're about to go do something.
Well, the point was, the point was, it doesn't really matter what that person's like. If they're hurting, it's my responsibility to hurt with them. And I can't do that if I don't enter into prayer about it. I hurt so much for Isaac that I came over here.
Well, and sometimes too, on the, I guess the reverse side of that saying is, there are people with small issues, but it's huge in their world. Like I'm talking with a couple now, and they're struggling financially, and it's not that bad from the outside looking in, talking with them, but they're in it, and it seems impossible. Like they're $100 away from being okay, you know. But in their world right now, it seems so where it's not that, you know, from the outside looking in, it's not that huge of an issue. But when you talk with them, it's a God-sized moment for them.
Yeah, well, I've seen in emergency services that people would call us, it's the worst moment in their life when we get called into their house for whatever reason.
Right.
And we're just like, whatever, it's again. And it's another domestic violence, or it's another tummy ache or whatever, but it's the worst moment in that person's life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you have to be on guard to not get hardened or complacent to it.
That's right.
Yeah, that you have to have that empathy.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge to not get hardened to that kind of stuff.
Especially as a pastor, we have, for our people, we have to have that. We
Yeah.
gotta be able to discern when to have that empathy and not, because we can crush somebody at the wrong time, I think.
Yeah, if they don't think you care about them, they won't listen to you,
Yeah.
And then
especially their families.
with building that trust where you can have those talks, those honest talks with people, a lot of issues are a personal responsibility issue where, okay, you have this problem, like the one issue came up years ago about, well, we're short on money for our medications. Well, you spend $100 a week on cigarettes. Okay, this ain't a debate on cigarettes, but, you know, whether you should or shouldn't, and that was a problem. That caused some hard feelings.
And they left the church over
And,
it.
But they didn't let me do the funeral.
but that was a hard thing, but also, like I said, there's opportunities for us as when you're in that pastoral role or counseling role, that, hey, let's take a look at some personal responsibility that you have to have over your life, you know, and not continue this behavior that keeps getting you in this spot or whatever. You know, my tummy hurts, well, quit eating awful food every time, 3 meals a day. And that kind of, so we got some personal responsibility has to come into that too. But that has to be done with love.
That's right.
With love though, and after that trust is built, where they're like, look, you trust me, let's have a talk about this. I'm having to do that with somebody,
Right.
that there's some personal responsibility here that you gotta take and change your ways so that these problems you're having don't continue.
It's one of those, you just want me to listen to you, or you're gonna try to help you?
Yeah, let me steer you and guide you in the right direction. So, but yeah, it's the worst moment in their life, potentially. that we're getting called into. And, you know, for that prayer need.
Hallelujah. All right. Well, let's close in a word of prayer. This has been great. I went over. So we'll have a shorter class in the next.
We went over.
No, it's okay. It's okay. If the persons that watch it on the video, if they want to stop at 8 o'clock, they can stop at 8 o'clock. Right? They can do whatever they want. So, Jeremy, you want to close for us?
Sure. Dear Lord, I come to you today, and I thank you so much for our time together, our instruction, our debate, our discussions, Lord. And I just pray for each and every one here and our ministry, current and future. Lord, just pray that you give us the wisdom we need and discernment in all these areas. Lord, we love you and just ask that you bless each and every one here. This in your holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.